And that's a good point about Medwatch too. That's essentially just the program that the FDA uses as a way to compile and track all of these adverse effects. And so, I mean, you could literally sign up for notifications just for, hey, a medication gets added, or there's these million reports coming out on this particular thing. And I just like to stay in the know. You know, my parents are on 20 medications, and you know, you never know. I want to know about recalls, and I want to know about these sorts of things. They do make that generally accessible. And then even going one step further to something like Medwatch, and not to jump too far ahead, and I know that Joey might have something to add here too, is that what this sounds like is that the Singular thing is potentially on track to something a little more complex, something referred to as a REMS program medication.
Okay. What is that?
And so REMS just stands for Risk Evaluation in Mitigation Strategies. And now REMS is sort of just the overarching umbrella of these different steps that can be taken to prevent these issues from occurring, or, you know, maybe making access to these medications intentionally a little more difficult. But the one example that comes to mind is something called iPledge. And so for medications like Accutane or isotretinoin, which has a known risk to cause issues with pregnancy and, you know, passing on, you know, or ending up with birth defects and that sort of thing, which is very serious. So essentially the prescriber has to be signed up with this iPledge program. The patient has to be signed up with this program. The pharmacy has to be signed up. The insurance is involved. So a prescription for that medication can't just be sent to a pharmacy and processed without the patient having certain tests done, the office knowing how to conduct those tests, the pharmacy verifying that those tests were done. The pharmacy can't place the order for the medication until all those other things are met. So it's just that it's maybe people are thinking like, what in the heck happens with Singular?
Right.
There's a chance that given how all of this is going, maybe this isn't as serious. You hate to say that, but the point is there's always a step further with this with these strategies.
I guess the pushback is that 99% of people benefit from taking this medication, or at least don't have this serious adverse side effect. So we don't stop helping the 99% because of the risk to the 1%. The big takeaway seems to be that you need to be an informed consumer. And that's what a box warning is about. In addition to your doctor telling you these things, your pharmacist pointing these things out, but that the box warning is to point out, if you haven't noticed it already, hey, there's this thing you need to be watching out for just in case.
Absolutely. And I think, what do we talk about so much? And it's so basic, but to me, it just underlies so much of what we talk about. The scale, the risk reward. So for example, asthma, how serious asthma can be.
Yeah.
The bar is a little different, maybe a little lower for needing to take that medication. What else is this drug approved for? Allergic rhinitis. I'm not, again, minimizing how uncomfortable allergic rhinitis is. It's especially, when you deal with allergens, seasonal, hay fever, pollen dust, mold, those kind of things. But knowing this, and you have a child, maybe the bar, if it's the same drug, but the bar for allergic rhinitis is different than the bar for asthma to me.
Makes sense.
Further, if you have a family history of psychiatric issues, even anxiety, let alone depression, more serious things, God forbid, suicidal thoughts and ideations, the bar changes there too. Yes, it's for asthma. Yes, my child has asthma, but boy, I have a family history of this. The concern changes. So I think that's what's critical too, is just knowing, and then you adjust your scales based on what your situation may be. They did find that there was an increased rate in patients with no psychiatric history, but it still can occur, but it's definitely increased.
Okay.
Increased odds.
Yeah.
It seems like the FDA is kind of in a tough spot here. They've already applied the box warning, which is the most stringent notification warning that they put on a med. It's been out for 20 something years at this point. It's generic. It's helping millions of people. What is it they're supposed to do? You said what was it called? The REMS program?
The REMS program, yes.
So that's a possibility. Is there anything else they can do?
So in that Attorney General's letter, I mean, there was a call to action on a few different things, and I think that highlights, some of the options. They want the New York Attorney General's office essentially called for them to issue a new drug safety communication, stating basically like the FDA is doing something about this. Like they're launching an official investigation. They're looking more closely at clinical trials. Like they need somebody to go in deep on a lot of this data. Very similar to what was happening with the phenylephrine. They did a deep dive on all the existing evidence and said, all right, we're going to figure out whether or not we need to come to a consensus on this.
Right.
You know what I mean? We got all these reports, we got all this stuff. We've been working on this for years. Let's get the epidemiologists on this and figure out what the data really says. And then the second thing is ultimately just sending out like a PSA. They call it a Dear Healthcare Provider letter to all chains of command. So this is physicians' offices, pharmacists, other healthcare providers, almost just as like a starting from scratch sort of thing. Here's this drug. Here's how it works. Here's what can happen. Take a look at your patients. Take a look at everything. We're time to look at this a little more objectively. They also kind of take it one step further in calling for them to essentially, I'll just read what they said, conduct a review of all available information to determine whether the risk from use of Montelukast clearly outweighs any therapeutic benefit in children and warrants a contraindication warning that it should not be used in children under 18. And so, in looking at the data one step further, saying, are we at the point where we might be able to say that in this subset of the population that maybe
that the risk is too
maybe
great.
It is a contraindication. And then lastly, like you said, was that kind of final step. Let's look at one of these more, look at imposing one of these more stringent, multi-level, complex REMS strategies that just makes it harder to acquire the drug, dispense the drug, and the patient start taking it essentially.
Okay.